street, they were completely rammed. They were filled up to the gunnels, they were queuing down the street. They said, you should have been here last week. I swear, you should have been here last week. Oh yeah, you should have been here last week.
Welcome to the latest episode of You Should Have Been Here Last Week, the podcast presented by myself, Steve Gribbin, and fellow comedian Paul Ricketts.
Hello.
This is the podcast that takes a peek behind the comedy curtain at the movers, shakers, muckrakers and myth makers of this business that we call comedy. And today's guest, we're very, very happy to have him, is stand-up comedian, champion quizzer, qualified doctor, television star, and now fully fledged author, the one and only Paul Sinha. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hello, Steve. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
It gets mentioned that you're a qualified doctor. It's one of those things that if you're a comedian and you're a qualified doctor, it will get mentioned as well. Whereas a qualified electrician would not really make it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because obviously having tried to plug the book quite a lot in the media this year, I've been asked about the medicine a lot. And I feel it's very much part of the class-obsessed culture that we have here, because there are far more teachers than doctors who went into comedy, but no one ever says, what was that like? It's just that people can't believe that anyone could give up such a sort of high-ranking career to do something as unstable as comedy.
I mean, I really enjoyed the book, by the way. I thought it was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
There's a great bit you say at the end, what a gamble, but also it's never too late to change your life, because one of the things I thought was great about it is that you're really honest about, your failings and your mistakes and things that went wrong. And I just wanted to ask, how did you start off intending it to be like that, or?
I'm aware of the life that I've led. I'm aware that it's zigged and it's zagged and it's gone in all sorts of different directions, and I'm aware that none of it was really planned. And that's why I thought it'd be an interesting story to tell, of how I've kind of somehow landed on my feet, having been absolutely all over the shop, all over my life, whether it's the gambling addiction or not knowing what to do with a medical career that really wasn't me, or not having any sort of what I'd call natural funny bones. I've always been someone who learned to be. I was always someone who learned to be a stand-up comedian because I really loved stand-up comedy. I watch people like Ross Noble or Dave Johns, for instance, and I go, "Wow, I would love to be as naturally gifted and funny as them." But I've always felt that I've had to really work from the bottom and work my way up, and so I think that. It's also the fact that I'm not a stunning success as a comedian. I'm a success. I mean, I headline gigs all over the country, but I don't sell. I have to work to sell tickets on tour. I've never done Mock the Week. I've never done Live at the Apollo. I've never done a lot of the sort of typical sort of flags that you're meant to pass to call yourself a proper comedian. But I've forged my own sort of way from this sort of fortuitous concurrent quiz career.
Yeah, I mean, the book does read like a love letter to quizzing as well, doesn't it?
Well, I hope so, because it's meant to be, as much as anything else, it's meant to be a love letter to obsession and hobby, being obsessed with your hobbies and taking them seriously and seeing where that kind of takes you in life. And what you said about it's never too late to change the direction of your life, I think is really interesting. I was at Radio 2 in the park yesterday in Preston. And one of the most interesting acts I saw on stage was Shed 7. Reason being that I think everyone had decided they knew what Shed 7 were about. And they'd kind of been dismissed as that sort of mid-level Britpop band. But they've topped the album charts this year just by working really hard and going, no, we're going to keep producing good music. And eventually people are going to remember who we are and start buying our records again. And that's exactly what they've done. So I'm a firm believer that it's never too late for any of us to change that flight path that we're meant to be on.
So, I mean, how did you get started in comedy? Let's start with the most obvious question.
It was very much I had a love affair with stand-up as a consumer, and I had some time off in 1994 after failing my medical finals, where me and my sister went to a lot of comedy clubs in London. And we saw some great acts, and we saw some new act competitions with some terrible acts. We saw everything in between. And I suppose that one of the sort of academies of learning really was the Cosmic. You both probably remember the Cosmic Comedy Club in Hammersmith,
Yeah.
and their Tuesday night new act night,
Mm.
where people got to take part in a new act competition in front of what could be 100, 150 people. It was very exciting, and I used to watch it all the time. And I saw people like Lee Mack and Johnny Vegas sort of win the night there. And one day I thought, I want to give it a go. I was always someone who wrote jokes at medical school for reviews and stuff. And I just thought to myself, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that I'm the worst act on the bill. I get booed off, and then I'll never do it. I'll never do it again. That's the worst that can happen. And I didn't think that was necessarily the be all and end, that would ever really define me as a person. So I just decided to give it a go. And the first gig, which was Hard Bloody Har in Hanwell, the Viaduct Inn.
Oh my God! Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Friday night, new act night. I assumed I wasn't going to be the worst act on the bill because I'd seen a lot of new act nights. And then they had the winner from the previous week, a guy called Oliver Turnbull, do a 10-minute spot, and he absolutely smashed it. And I sat there in genuine terror going, what have I done? I've misjudged this completely. But luckily that wasn't typical of the night. And it was just a sort of hodgepodge of good acts and bad acts and indifferent acts. And I didn't stand out necessarily, but I didn't sort of sink either. I was somewhere vaguely in between. But the bizarre thing was my second gig, because it was within a week of the first gig. And it was in the King's Head Theatre in Islington, which is a small theatre space. They ran a sort of late night Saturday, briefly, they ran a late night Saturday gig. And I rang up their number from Time Out, and they said, we can fit you in on Saturday, this coming Saturday. And I just thought, oh my good Lord, well, I've rung up, so I might as well take it on. And it was hosted by Simon Pegg, and it was headlined by Ed Byrne, who was a late replacement for Mark Thomas. So that's who I got to gig with on my second ever gig. and there were three of us in the first half, and I absolutely smashed it. I mean, I genuinely smashed it. Now, it's a bit of a false positive, because I'm on a stage where a lot of my medical school friends are coming to see me do comedy at every gig. So there's very much a sort of supportive false positive going on there. But that was the gig that made me think, oh, I'll hang on in there. And that's kind of exactly what I did for years, just hang on in there, doing 5s and 10s here and there, not with any great plan as to what I wanted to do. I didn't, you have these people now thinking that they'll do a 30-minute at Edinburgh in their third year and an hour in their fourth year. I didn't have any of that going on. I mean, as far as I was concerned, Edinburgh was what famous people did. It never even occurred to me I'd ever go to Edinburgh. I just wanted to hang around in comedy clubs and tell jokes. That was it, really. That was the limit of my ambitions.
I mean, you did enter Hackney New Act of the Year competition, didn't you? And you come third.
Yeah, in 1999, and I also entered it in 1996 or 7. I can't remember which one. And I mean, you'll recognise this. In the first time I entered, I absolutely smashed the heat, and I didn't get through. And the reason I didn't get through is they already had their gay act for the final.
Yeah.
That's fundamentally why I didn't get through, because I had a much poorer heat in 99. When they told me I was in the final, I was like, what are you talking about? I smashed it last time. You didn't put me through.
Same thing happened to me with Hackney Empire, where they said, well, we've already had a couple of good black acts. And I said to Roland Muldoon, so I said, so in essence, basically, this isn't a competition, it's best in category. That's what you're really saying. It's like Crufts.
Fundamentally, it's Hackney. That's the thing. It's a showcase for the borough. And a showcase for the borough, by definition, has to have diversity. Although I watched the 96 final, in which Noel Britton beat Jeannie Ashray. And Noel Britton's, he was a great, really funny comedian. But there was an opportunity to give the gold medal to a genuine Northeast London black, we're allowed to say lesbian, aren't we? Yeah. And they she smashed it, and they didn't give it to her. They gave it to Noel Britton. So it's a curious business at the best of times.
You mentioned the guy in the book there. That I just wanted to bring him up briefly. Sorry, Paul. Is Anton? One of the great lost comedians. I actually thought he was brilliant. He dazzled very briefly and then just disappeared.
I don't know where he is now. I just remember The rumor I heard was that he did the Avalon Comedy Network and then just got bored of it and went back to being a painter decorator, whatever it was he was doing. But yeah,
Yeah.
just 5 to 10 minute
If
hilarious
Anton,
set. But
Anton, if you're watching, we love you.
yeah,
Would you say you started off telling jokes? Because when I saw you, obviously you've been going for a bit by then, and what I found interesting and distinctive about you was that you were a storyteller, and you'd link three stories together.
it took a long time to get to that stage, and it's really weird how you don't realize what things could be turning points in your career. But there was an instant with a outside a gig in I think it was Manchester in 2000, when I was at a taxi rank, and I ended up drunkenly staring at this couple snogging, and this sort of Manx Scally looked at me and accused me of fancying his girlfriend. And I wrote a routine about the whole thing, and it was the first time I'd written a routine where joke followed joke followed joke followed joke, and it was all part of the same thing. And that was very much the turning point routine for me. It was the early noughties. Well, I thought, oh, I don't have to do detached one-liners. I can sort of string them all together. And then the second turning point was 2005, coming out to my dad, where suddenly I had something quite important to talk about that I could be funny about. And that really changed everything for me, because that's the story I took to the 2006 Edinburgh Festival. And I kind of knew what I was doing in 2006. I'd gone up in 2004 as a very naive. I hadn't done a single preview, not one preview. I just thought I'd wing it, and that you can't really do that. You can do it on the free fringe to a degree, because people come and see you if they're not paying money. But if people are paying money to see you, they're not going to see you unless they've got a reason. And I was largely ignored in 2004, and it was, and I suppose in many ways, perhaps that was good for me to be largely ignored, so that nobody put a dagger in my heart and said this guy's shit or this guy's terrible or this. I was able to learn from the experience at my own pace. But it meant that next time I came back in 2006, I knew what I was doing. I'd worked out what to do. I'd worked out that I didn't want to be an Asian comedian just talking about being Asian, because that's been done. I wanted to have a sort of distinctive voice and a distinctive tale to tell. I got myself a PR person that had a really good reputation, and he seemed to tell the journalists, "Oh, this guy's the next big thing." He was one of those really good PR people. I remember reading a review in the Daily Telegraph saying, "Much heralded this year is," and I played 15 people that afternoon. And it's like, what do you mean much heralded? No, because someone please explain these words to me. It's all. I mean, we know Edinburgh's an elaborate con trick, and that PR people decide to plant the seeds in journalists' heads, and that's what happens. And the journalists believe everything they're told. But for 2 years, 2006 and 2007, I played on that. I had a good PR, and I haven't had good PR since. And I think it's told, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, what's your feeling about the direction that the Edinburgh Festival is going in? I mean, we often get into this with a lot of our guests. Is there a future for it, or?
I mean, there's so many of us, but I think the future of what people who make their living primarily as club comedians, I think that increasingly we're ignored at the Edinburgh Festival in favour of people who are doing perhaps more creatively elaborate or sophisticated, seen as elaborate or sophisticated stuff. People telling a story about how their autism and their ADHD led them to attempt to take down the government and do that sort of thing. I mean, I've always seen myself as a storytelling, joke-telling comedian, and it seems to me that a lot of people with a lot more theatricality and a lot more, what I'd call theatre skills rather than comedic skills, are doing brilliantly at Edinburgh, because they're able to apply those skills to create something that's perhaps more visually arresting or leaves a more lasting impression. And us poor old-fashioned stand-up comedians, man at a mic, are losing the war slightly. I think it's a different art, Edinburgh. It's an hour, and you've got to keep people engaged for an hour, and it's tough. But the main thing with Edinburgh is that this relationship the PR and press have, because there's hardly anybody in the press that actually follows comedy 12 months of a year. And therein lies the main problem. is we're reliant really on Bruce Dessau and Steve Bennett, and that's pretty much it.
Oh, there's Logan. There's I
Well, no, but he's not really
name.
following. He doesn't follow club comedy. I mean, at least Dessau,
No, not at all.
at least Dessau and Chortle go to watch people in clubs, but then the mainstream journalists don't, and so they just see who's the big name from Melbourne or the name that the PR people, and they just go around the same 4 or 5 venues: Monkey Barrel, Pleasance, Underbelly. That's it, and it just means that a lot of things get missed.
I mean, you touched on it before about the class issue, but I think it is a class issue that the theatre critics of the broadsheets, they want the Edinburgh shows to be more theatrical because that they think that it's a higher form of art than stand-up is. They don't give any respect, I think, to.
But I think it's more complicated than that. That is definitely true. That we're looked down upon compared to more theatrical acts. But there's a lot to do with agents and PR people and whether you're considered, whether there's a buzz about you, whether you're in the right venue, whether you're in the right part of town. The Free Fringe, for instance, is increasingly marginalised and ignored every year in a way that it wasn't 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the Free Fringe was conjuring up stories of magic every year. And now the mainstream journalists are ignoring the Free Fringe completely, mainly because success, I think, and no one's really looked into this, successful shows on the Free Fringe, they're hard to get tickets. They're hard to get tickets for. Whereas I think journalists go to the shows where they're guaranteed to get it. They're guaranteed to get in by buying getting a critic ticket in advance. So it's really, I mean, Edinburgh's really, really complicated. And I mean, last year I went with my biggest show, and it was largely ignored because I was on the wrong side of town. I was in the Newtown Theatre in the I say largely ignored. It wasn't, I got big audiences, but no critics. Well, the Scotsman and Chortle came, and if you read the reviews, you realise I'd really gone for it. I'd done a song about a comedian on that we both know who stole one of my jokes. I closed with a song about him, and
I believe Paul wanted to ask you a question about that.
Yeah,
actually,
because I saw you that year. I think we did the Black Comedians Showcase.
Oh yeah, Shays, yeah.
Yeah, and you did a bit from the show, and I was thinking, wow, you are going for it. And I was talking to Steve. There was a sort of unwritten rule that comedians don't. What's the best way to put this?
Steal off each other.
Well, that's one thing. That's the biggest crime of all.
Yeah.
But then, if it happens, we're not supposed to complain about it. We're supposed to. I don't understand it either, and I think it makes.
The reason I complained about it is because he denied doing it first, then he admitted doing it, then he said he'd stopped doing it, and he carried on doing it. If it was just a first offence, I really wouldn't have gone to all that trouble. But it was the fact that he stood next, one of those New Year comedians parties that Susan Murray organises. He stood and said, "Oh, I'll stop doing it," and then he just carried on doing it. So I just thought I'll have some fun with this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm glad that show's over. I don't need to go through the stress of doing that song anymore. But
yeah, well, certainly song form is a much better way to deal with it. If you don't.
Yes, mind. I think so, and it was a good song as well.
Yeah, can I ask that? As a musical comedian, what I know that you've been moving into doing songs. What sort of prompted that?
Oh, Parkinson's, absolutely Parkinson's. Being diagnosed in 2019 meant I looked at my comedy career and I thought to myself, I want to take more chances and do weird shit. And not long after I was diagnosed, I did a gig with Vicky Stone, really good musical comedian, and her keyboard was really light. And I got in touch with her and said, "What's that keyboard you've got?" And she said, "This." And I bought it, and it was really light, and I got on with it very well. And I started. I mean, I must say I was very ill at the time. This is what not many people know about my Parkinson's. Is that for the first 2 years I was on medication that made me very unfiltered and very impulsive and very creative. And I was just during the lockdown, I was creating songs just one after another, pretty much every day, to the point where my agent rang me up and said, "Can you stop doing this?" And
stop it.
But because it was a side effect of the initial medication that I'd been put on. I was very impulsive and unfiltered. But I don't know where musical comedy will take me now because I've kind of run out of ideas. But I've enjoyed the fact that I've done a lot of comedy songs in the last four years, and the audience understand that that I'm not a good singer, and that with the Parkinson's I don't play as well as I used to be able to play. And the audience, you're taking the audience on a journey by making sure they understand that aspect. And it's been good because it means you have to write fewer jokes for an Edinburgh show. Practically speaking, that's been one of the best things about it. Is I only have to write 2/3 of a show, and the rest can be done with the rest can be done in music.
Oh, rumbled.
But I'm not going to be doing it in clubs because that keyboard's just way too troublesome to. But I was at the when I started, I was before lockdown, and indeed during lockdown, when we were doing gigs in car parks and this, that, and the other, I used to bring my keyboard everywhere with me because it just gave me my what I was doing a different dimension. But I'm sticking to jokes now for a while, I think.
How's your illness affected your stand-up? Is it just an ongoing thing?
I think very positively because I quite like being quite brutal and bleak. I've got a license to do jokes that are in very dubious taste, and I enjoy that license, and I've thoroughly enjoyed writing the shows that I've written since the diagnosis. I think it's given my comedy quite a bit of spark, and certainly in the last 12 months, I've without wishing to sound big-headed, I've smashed a lot of gigs that I don't think I would have smashed before 2019 because there's a sort of narrative and the audience are on your side in a way that people without a gimmick might find it harder to get that sort of point of connection with the audience.
I'm shocked you said gimmick, but you did say gimmick.
The gimmick is a thing, isn't it? I mean, I'm not saying I'm deliberately using my Parkinson's as a gimmick. I'm saying that comedians with an angle have an advantage over comedians without an angle. It's just there. We're all aware of comedians who are really, really good, but don't have an angle, and as a result, have perhaps not made that step into mainstream recognition. And we're all aware of comedians that don't have an angle at all and have, but it's a lot easier if you're known as they're the XYZ comedian. It's a lot easier. People have a sort of tag to remember what it is that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt sorry for white middle class comics because it's a saturated market, isn't it? Really, I mean, it's just there's so many of them. How do you be distinctive?
It is a saturated market, and but not on telly.
Not anymore. Well, I've heard many people complain about it. Yeah.
But I mean, I find that the complaints about tokenism and diversity and representation to be a bit silly, really, because I think that a show needs diversity. If I was promoting a London club and I had to pick 4 acts, I'd try and make sure that at least one of them was a woman and one of them was non-white, so that we were guaranteed a diversity of opinions and attitudes and perspective. I think that's the word I'm looking for, because it's a show. It's not who are the 4 best comedians that are available to me. It's which 4 comedians will make the best show that I can put to the audience in front of me. I think too many people look at comedy as a competition. It's not a competition. It's where can you fit in and how can you help the show.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. It's not about them. It's about the audience and the whole night.
It's when people slagging off Mock the Week. It's like I just don't want to watch. No matter how I'm sure there are any number of combinations of 6 heterosexual white men that would make me laugh out loud for 30 minutes without hesitation. But that's not what I want to see from Mock the Week. I want to see, because I don't want there to be crossover. I don't want there to be crossover of attitude and opinion. I want it to be a melting pot, because that makes a better show. There are an incalculable number of really, really ludicrously funny white middle class heterosexual comedians. It's not a slight on them. It's about putting a show together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to that thing about being on television, etc. But there's a certain skill set, I suppose, to being a panelist on those sort of shows. I mean, I remember a story that Robin Ince told that he only appeared on there once. He said it was the worst because he's not suited to it. You know, it's a different skill set. But he remembers being in the toilet with two of the main protagonists in it, and they were all three of them side by side, and he was in the middle, and you said, brutal, eh? And neither of them said anything to him.
I've dipped my toes in the whole panel thing, and it's you know, I've got to accept that it's not necessarily what I'm good at. I mean, I'd like to have a go at Have I Got News for You, because I think that's the one that's most suited to me. But when I was absolutely ignored for Mock the Week, it never really bothered me, because I never thought I'd be good at Mock the Week. I mean, I'd love to have given it a try, but it never even occurred to me that that was the format that would make me shine. I mean, I've only just come up with this, but being a comedian, you could see as being like a heptathlete or a decathlete. You're not going to be good at all. You're not going to be good at all the disciplines. No one would ever sit down and watch Katrina Johnson Thompson throw a shot put for an afternoon, but they would watch it over. They would watch in various of the other events, and we can't be good at them all.
Yeah, and that's a good way. That's a good analogy, isn't it? Because you also talk in the book about the time you did panto, didn't you?
Yeah,
and I was a great bit in the book.
And when the first review came out, and everyone was praised apart from me, that was told that I was the weak link in the cast. Everyone was so nice to me, but it was such a sort of dagger blow to realize you're carrying, they're carrying you in the show. But it was very humbling, because there were people who just brilliant panto dames and support cast members who were really driving the show much more than the celebrities, but not getting the same pay packet because nobody knew who they were. But they were the real stars of the show. It's all very well.
What was the name of the character that you were playing?
I was the main villain in Abanazar. And it was great in one sense, because you walk on stage and you're immediately booed by the entire audience, which is genuinely quite thrilling. But I never conjured up the essence of fear that I was meant to. I never came close. Nobody was genuinely scared. None of those kids out there were genuinely scared. They just
Would you ever do it again?
Oh no. I've got to be careful what I say here, because I said on a podcast 2 or 3 years ago that I wouldn't do panto again, and the tabloids ran headlines saying heartbroken chaser reveals that Parkinson's has robbed him of the ability to do panto or whatever. But all the costume changes, they're quite quick, and I can't do them. I mean, my Parkinson's means I can't get undressed and dressed quickly, and so no, it's not for me. But I'm glad I did it. It was a unique experience, and to do it with Suzanne Shaw and Fraser Hines and Debbie McGee, three people that I knew only too well from the world of entertainment. It was very educational to work with them, and I'm glad I did it. But it's just an entertaining footnote in my career.
No, I was just thinking about, I did work recently with Bobby Davro.
Oh yeah,
he was heartbroken that for the first time in 120 years he wasn't doing pantomime.
But why would he not? I don't understand why he wouldn't. He would genuinely put bums on seats, and that's what he would. That's fundamentally what it's about. And they were right. I put bums on seats because it was in York, and in York the chase is massive. I'd walk the streets of York, and people would stop me everywhere and go, "Hi, I have this weird life where north of the Watford Gap, I'm recognised everywhere I go." And in London, I can go weeks without a single human being going, "Is that you?" off the chase. Because London's just such a different ecosystem.
Yeah, how did you get onto the chase? How did you get onto the chase?
I was always into quiz. Suddenly, I got a phone call from Simon Evans. Back in when was it? 2007. Saying that Pete Graham from the King's Head wanted to put a team together for University Challenge the Professionals. And through a series of auditions, it ended up being him, me, Simon Evans, Pete, me, Simon Evans, and Natalie Haynes.
Oh, wow.
And with that amount of brain power in the team, we genuinely thought we were going to do well. but they put us up against a proper team of ringers from the Ministry of Justice. A team of, I mean, one of them was, when I looked his name up, was described as perhaps the most significant figure in the history of British academic buzzer quizzing. And I thought, oh Christ! And I realised that we weren't meant to win, and we got absolutely battered. And I just wanted to get better, and so I just started applying for stuff. And then every time I was on something, I'd Google my name to see if anyone had noticed that that comedian was on a quiz show. And eventually, there was a big quiz forum and a big quiz website where two complete strangers were discussing me, and I just thought, who are these people? What is this website? And it was the website of British Quizzing, and that's how I got my toes in, and that was 2007. And in 20, so I've been hanging around in that sort of environment for about 3 or 4 years. When in 2011 ITV said to the 3 chasers that they had on already, they were going to look for a 4th chaser, and they all went, well, we know someone who does comedy and quizzes. You want to have a look at him? And so I went in and auditioned, and next thing you know, I remember exactly where I was, Crown Plaza in Liverpool by the docks. Got into my hotel room. Sally rang me up and said, "You got the job," and it was April, and it was April the 1st. So I wasn't entirely sure whether she was being serious or not. And I'll be honest with you, I was absolutely delighted, but I had no idea how big it was going to get, because it wasn't that big then. It was doing okay, but everything changed with Fanny Schmeller. This viral clip of Bradley Corping at a German skier called Fanny Schmeller. It went viral and just turned the success of the show upside down. That one clip being seen by millions of people around the world meant that everybody knew what the chase was, and it changed Bradley's career as well, because he went from being obviously successful, but we're talking relatively journeyman. I mean, he was on Corrie and Law and Order, so you can't knock his success, but he wasn't at the top of the ladder like he is now. Now he's absolutely mainstream #1, one of the most loved presenters in British television, and that's kind of weird how it happens. That incident with Fanny Schmeller's name,
I remember it
was very much the catalyst that changed everything. One of the reasons I wanted to write the book was I wanted people to know what it's like being a comedian who's not necessarily at the top, and had never had any plans to be a comedian. I think it's an unusual story in that sense. There's a little bit of cattiness here and there, a lot of honesty, and some spectacular deaths. I mean, and the one that I really enjoyed talking about was one in the Comedy Cafe one Christmas, where there was I had to hide in the kitchen for 45 minutes while a brawl took place. And do you remember Dominic Frisby's Downfall parody video?
Yes.
There's a line in it saying, "Have you ever tried to follow Ricky Grover at Bow? It's impossible." And I had to follow Ricky Grover. I had to follow Ricky Grover at the cafe at Christmas. I mean, you can't hand somebody me with my middle class witticisms about being the public school educated gay son of Asian immigrants. Had to follow Ricky Grover at Christmas, and there was only one way the gig was ever going to go, but it was such a spectacular death. And I think that owning your deaths is such a big part. And we've worked with so many brilliant people in our careers. Then there must be people we know who hardly ever died, but we don't want to know about that, do we?
No, of course we don't. We want to know about the spectacular. You've got to be big enough to admit when you've died. Don't absolutely. Gloss it over and pretend it never happened.
Yeah, when it incites violence, I mean that's special. It's happened to me a couple of times where people have fought over how bad I was.
Well, if you get Jared Christmas, he tells a brilliant one about a gig going wrong in West London. Really, he ended up being scared to get home. He was lucky to get home. But it's really weird that no other art form inspires this level of anger and hatred.
You don't get that theatre, do you?
No.
But there was a time in my life where I'd be doing academic buzzer quizzing in the morning and jongleurs in the evening, and it was such a weird conflict of interests, because I'll be trying to answer questions about 17th century literature and medieval history, and then evening I'll be standing in Reading while a bunch of women with inflatable penises are just ignoring me en masse. And there was one night where Curtis Walker had to walk me out of the building for my own safety at Reading. And that I don't think it was a coincidence that I'd had an academic buzzer quiz that afternoon.
Oh my God! I think we better wrap up,
Yes,
Mr.
we should.
Ricketts. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. That was brilliant.
No worries. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, and also, please buy the book. It's really good.
I'm sorry if I forgot to name. Did I forget to name you in that whole incident with Jim Davison?
You did, yeah, but it doesn't matter. He called me a red-faced, sweaty Scouse git, but he really upset Mick Ferry, didn't he, by calling him Stan Ogden?
Yeah, I remember.
Mick has never forgotten that. Never.
Sorry.
He got really angry.
Oh, much though I hate Jim Davison, that's quite a good line. So that was Paul Sinha. A really lovely interview.
Great.
I was going to ask him about, funny enough, when he told me that he used to go to pubs and take on the quiz machines, and any gig he was doing, he'd find a local pub, find the quiz machine and clean it out.
Because he's so clever.
Yes.
You'd think after a while some of the pubs would get a bit wise to it, wouldn't you? Very interesting though, and I actually can say that the book is very good. It's right up there on my little comic shelf, top 3.
It's growing by the day, isn't it? Your comics book list.
Yeah. Well, I burned some of them. So no, I haven't. I haven't. That was a joke.
Save that to the winter time when you need the heat. That's what.
Oh yes, exactly.
So, if you enjoyed this wonderful podcast, tell your friends, like, share. Well, what's the other things? I should have learned this by now.
Yeah, like, share, provide a link to somewhere else. Like that.
Subscribe if you're watching.
That's right.
If watching the YouTube thing, basically just tell your friends, get more people to listen and watch. And we'll be back because we've just been back after our Edinburgh break. You went off on holiday to Ireland, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's great.
And had a fantastic time.
I did indeed. Yeah. I saw no comedy.
No comedy at all. I went to San Francisco, saw comedy, had a terrible time. We'll see you again in a fortnight's time. This is the start of our new season because it's the start of the new comedy season as well as the football season. Season 3. This will be the first episode. So we'll see you in a fortnight's time. Bye.
They said you should have been